First contact and invasion. The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, transmitted through the quantum communications array that humanity had only recently mastered. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of the Lunar Observatory, her hands trembling as she read the alien script that the translation matrix had decoded. After centuries of wondering if we were alone in the universe, humanity had its answer. The Zorth Empire had made contact. "This can't be right," she whispered, reading the message again. What should have been a moment of celebration instead filled her with dread. The transmission wasn't a greeting, it was a declaration. The Zorth Empire, spanning hundreds of systems and thousands of years of history, had designated Earth and its colonies as harvestable territories. Sarah immediately alerted Earth's Unified Defense Council. Within hours, emergency meetings were convened across every major city on Earth and throughout the colonial settlements on Mars, Europa, and Titan. Humanity had spent the last century expanding through their solar system, establishing thriving communities and developing technologies that seemed like magic compared to their humble beginnings. But now, faced with an advanced alien empire, would it be enough? The Zorth didn't wait long for Earth's response. Their first ships appeared just beyond Neptune's orbit, massive vessels that dwarfed humanity's largest space stations. Initial scans suggested each ship was nearly the size of Manhattan, bristling with weapons that human sensors couldn't even properly analyze. Admiral James Chen, Sarah's father and commander of Earth's combined space fleet, ordered all civilian vessels to retreat to the nearest fortified ports. "We knew this day might come," he addressed his officers aboard the flagship Terran Dawn. "We've prepared, we've trained, and we've built our defenses. Whatever happens next, remember that we stand united." The first attack came 3 days later. The Zorth ships launched what appeared to be diplomatic shuttles toward Earth's orbital defense platforms. It was a ruse. As soon as they came within range, the shuttles exploded into clouds of self-replicating nanites that began consuming the defense platforms from the inside out. Humanity's response was immediate and fierce. Emergency protocols that had been developed for just such a scenario were activated. Quantum-linked defense systems that couldn't be compromised by conventional hacking sprang to life. EMP bursts from hidden satellites destroyed swarms of nanites, while railgun platforms on the moon opened fire on the larger Zorth vessels. The alien invaders seemed genuinely surprised by the resistance. Their communications, now being actively intercepted and decoded, revealed their confusion. They had expected an easy conquest, a simple harvesting operation. Instead, they found themselves facing an opponent that had spent generations preparing for interstellar war. Colonel Jace, then just a major commanding the orbital defense station Liberty 7, made his first mark on the war during this initial engagement. When Zorth boarding parties breached his station, instead of falling back to defensive positions as per standard protocol, he ordered his Marines to counterattack. Using experimental-powered armor suits, they took the fight directly to the alien borders. "They think we're prey," Jace told his troops as they suited up. "Let's show them what happens when prey decides to hunt the hunter." The battle for Liberty 7 became legendary. Jace's Marines, despite being outnumbered and facing technologically superior opponents, used their knowledge of the station's layout and human ingenuity to devastating effect. They sealed corridors and vented sections to space, used maintenance robots as impromptu bombs, and even managed to capture several Zorth soldiers alive, providing humanity with its first detailed look at their anatomy and technology. But for every victory like Liberty 7, there were devastating losses. The Zorth's plasma weapons could slice through even the heaviest human armor. Their ship's shields seemed impenetrable to conventional weapons, and their troops fought with the confidence of a species that had conquered countless worlds before. The colonies suffered the worst. Mars held out thanks to its extensive underground facilities and automated defense systems, but the outer settlements were devastated. Europa's ice cities were melted by Zorth energy weapons, while Titan's mining operations were seized for their valuable resources. The losses were staggering, but something unexpected happened. Instead of breaking humanity's will to fight, each defeat only hardened their resolve. The Zorth, used to species that either submitted to their superiority or fought according to predictable patterns, found themselves facing an enemy that grew more dangerous with each setback. Dr. Sarah Chen, working with a team of xenobiologists and military strategists, made a crucial discovery during this period. The Zorth, despite their technological advantages, had become evolutionarily stagnant. Their strict hierarchical society and millennia of unchallenged dominance had left them inflexible, unable to adapt quickly to new situations. Humanity, in contrast, excelled at adaptation. Within weeks of the first attacks, engineers were already developing countermeasures to Zorth weapons. Captured alien technology was reverse-engineered with remarkable speed, while new tactical doctrines were developed and implemented almost daily. Admiral Chen recognized that they couldn't win a conventional war, not yet. Instead, he proposed a strategy that would buy humanity time to adapt and develop new weapons. Earth's forces would appear to retreat, drawing the Zorth into an increasingly complex web of guerrilla warfare and tactical traps. The strategy proved costly but effective. The Zorth, accustomed to direct confrontations and swift victories, found themselves bogged down in a type of warfare they had never encountered. Their supply lines were harassed by small, fast-attack craft. Their communication networks were flooded with false information. Every seemingly abandoned human facility became a potential death trap. As the first month of the war drew to a close, Colonel Jace, newly promoted after his actions on Liberty 7, stood on the observation deck of the surviving orbital platform Democracy 3. Below him, Earth's cities glowed with determination rather than fear. Factories that had once produced civilian goods now manufactured weapons and armor. Universities had become research centers for military technology. Even the arts had been repurposed, with musicians and artists creating propaganda that kept morale high and reminded everyone what they were fighting for. "They thought we would break," Jace said to his assembled officers. "They thought we would submit or retreat to our caves. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen before, a species that doesn't just survive their attacks, but learns from them. Adapts. Evolves. And ultimately, turns their own tactics against them." The first phase of the war was drawing to a close, but both sides knew this was just the beginning. The Zorth were learning, albeit slowly, that they had awakened something unprecedented in their long history of conquest. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for revenge, for justice, and for the right to determine their own destiny among the stars. Little did the Zorth know that their greatest nightmare was just beginning. The lessons humanity learned in these early defeats would soon be turned against them with a vengeance that would shake their empire to its foundations. Evolution of warfare. 6 months into the war, the remnants of Europa's research facilities finally bore fruit. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the underground bunker of Mars Base Alpha, presenting her findings to the United Earth Defense Council. The holographic displays around her showed the fruits of countless sacrifices, the breakthrough that would change the course of the war. "The Zorth's shield technology isn't impenetrable," she explained, manipulating the 3D model floating before the assembled military leaders. "It's based on quantum field manipulation, yes, but it has a fundamental flaw. They never expected anyone to discover it because no species they've encountered has approached warfare the way we do." Colonel Jace, now heading the newly formed Special Warfare Division, leaned forward in his chair. "Explain." "Their shields are perfectly calibrated against single, powerful impacts, the kind of attacks most species resort to. But they never adapted their technology to handle multiple, precisely timed smaller hits." Sarah's eyes gleamed with fierce pride. "We've developed what we call the Swarm Strike Protocol. Thousands of micro-projectiles, each individually too weak to trigger their shield's primary response, all hitting in a precise sequence." The implications were staggering. Humanity had spent generations developing swarm technology for peaceful purposes, construction, exploration, and terraforming. Now, those same principles would be turned into a weapon that could crack the supposedly impenetrable defenses of their invaders. Admiral Chen, his hair now streaked with gray from the stress of endless battles, gave the immediate order. Begin production. Priority 1. Every shipyard, every factory. I want this technology deployed as soon as possible. But the swarm strike protocol was just the beginning. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its diversity of thought, its ability to approach problems from multiple angles simultaneously. While the primary research teams worked on defeating Zorth technology, others focused on understanding their psychology, their society, and their weaknesses. Dr. Maya Patel, a xenopsychologist working with captured Zorth prisoners, made another crucial discovery. Their hierarchy isn't just social, it's biochemical, she reported. Each Zorth produces pheromones that indicate their rank and role. They literally can't conceive of acting outside their designated position. It's not just training, it's hardwired into their biology. This insight led to the development of what would become known as Operation Chaos, a series of precisely targeted strikes aimed not at military objectives, but at disrupting the Zorth command structure itself. Human ships began carrying synthesized Zorth pheromones, broadcasting false command signals that threw entire enemy fleets into disarray. Colonel Jace's Special Warfare Division took these discoveries even further. They developed infiltration units, human soldiers equipped with experimental biomimetic suits that could fool Zorth sensory systems. These phantoms, as they came to be known, could penetrate deep into enemy territory, gathering intelligence and sabotaging crucial facilities. The first major test of these new technologies came at the Battle of Titan's Revenge. The moon's mining colonies had been under Zorth control for months, its resources feeding their war machine. But beneath the surface, human resistance fighters had been preparing, waiting for the right moment. Jace personally led the assault. The operation began with a seemingly straightforward attack, a small fleet of human warships challenging the Zorth defensive line. The aliens responded predictably, moving to crush what they saw as a foolish human offensive. That's when the trap was sprung. Swarm strike missiles launched from hidden silos on Titan's surface, their millions of micro-projectiles overwhelming the Zorth shields in precisely calculated sequences. Phantom teams, having infiltrated key facilities weeks earlier, activated electromagnetic pulse devices that had been disguised as standard mining equipment. As the Zorth commanders tried to respond, their command networks were flooded with contradictory pheromone signals. Lower-ranking warriors received orders that their biology told them came from superior officers, but which made no tactical sense. The rigid hierarchy that had served them for millennia became their greatest weakness. Keep pushing. Jace ordered as he led a team of power-armored troops through the corridors of the main Zorth command center. They can't adapt as quickly as we can. Use that against them. The Battle of Titan's Revenge marked a turning point in the war. For the first time, humanity didn't just survive a major engagement, they won it decisively. The Zorth lost an entire fleet, along with one of their most important resource bases. More importantly, they lost their aura of invincibility. But victory came with its own challenges. As humans began to understand and counter Zorth technology, they faced a moral dilemma. Some of their new weapons were devastating in their effectiveness. The question arose, in fighting monsters, how far could they go before becoming monsters themselves? This debate reached a crescendo when Dr. Chen's team developed the Neural Scrambler, a weapon that could potentially disrupt the Zorth's hierarchical biological programming completely. It would effectively destroy their entire society, reducing them to chaos. We have the power to break them completely, she explained to the Defense Council. Not just defeat them militarily, but unmake everything they are as a species. The question is, should we? Colonel Jace, who had seen the worst of the war firsthand, surprised many with his response. We're fighting this war not just to survive, but to prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars. The weapons we use, the tactics we employ, they'll define who we become after this is over. The Council ultimately decided to place limits on their most devastating weapons. Humanity would fight to win, but they would not descend to the level of those who had attacked them without provocation. This decision, while tactically limiting, would have far-reaching consequences for the future of human-alien relations. As the first year of the war drew to a close, humanity had evolved in ways the Zorth could never have predicted. Their technologies had advanced decades in mere months. Their military doctrine had transformed from defensive desperation to strategic innovation. Even their society had changed, becoming more unified while maintaining the diversity of thought that gave them their greatest advantage. The Zorth, for their part, were beginning to show signs of genuine fear. Their reports back to their central empire were filled with warnings about this unprecedented threat. Humanity wasn't just fighting back, they were learning, adapting, and developing countermeasures faster than the Zorth could respond. In his private quarters aboard the newly commissioned dreadnought Humanity's Dawn, Colonel Jace reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Zorth were pulling forces from other sectors of their empire, preparing for what they believed would be a decisive push to crush the human resistance once and for all. "Let them come," he murmured, studying the tactical displays. "Every time they attack us, we learn. Every weapon they use becomes our weapon. Every tactic they employ teaches us how to defeat them." The next phase of the war was approaching, one that would see humanity take the fight directly to the Zorth Empire. But first, they would need to survive the greatest onslaught they had faced yet. The technologies and tactics they had developed would be tested to their limits, and the true cost of their evolution would finally become clear. As alert sirens began to sound throughout the ship, Jace allowed himself a grim smile. The Zorth still hadn't learned the most important lesson: humans didn't just fight to win, they fought to ensure their enemies could never threaten them again. The real question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but what they would become in the process of ensuring their survival. The breaking point. The Zorth counteroffensive began with a sight that would haunt humanity's collective memory for generations to come. 3,000 warships emerged from slipspace simultaneously, their massive forms blotting out the stars across Earth's entire defensive sphere. It was the largest alien fleet ever assembled in the Empire's history, commanded by High Admiral Cthax himself, the legendary warrior who had conquered the Perseus arm in a single campaign. Colonel Jace stood on the bridge of Humanity's Dawn, watching the tactical displays light up with thousands of enemy signatures. The intelligence reports had warned them this was coming, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. The Zorth had stripped their borders with other alien empires, gambling everything on this one massive strike to end the human threat. "They still don't understand," he muttered, causing his XO, Commander Sarah Martinez, to look up from her station. "Sir. They think overwhelming force is the answer. That if they just bring enough ships, enough weapons, we'll finally break." He turned to face his crew, his voice carrying across the command deck. "Sound battle stations. Initiate Operation Hydra." Throughout the solar system, humanity's defenders moved according to plans months in the making. The Zorth expected to find Earth's forces concentrated around the homeworld and major colonies. Instead, they encountered a defense in depth unlike anything they'd prepared for. Dr. Sarah Chen's latest invention came into play first. Quantum-entangled sensors, hidden in the debris fields of previous battles, began mapping the Zorth fleet's movements in real time. Every attempt at strategic surprise was anticipated and countered before it could develop. Multiple hostile formations attempting to outflank Mars Defense Grid Alpha, reported the AI tactical coordinator, its artificial voice calm amid the chaos. Phantom teams in position and awaiting authorization. Admiral Chen, coordinating the overall defense from the hidden command center beneath Olympus Mons, gave the order. Authorization granted. All teams, execute at will. The Phantom teams, now numbering in the hundreds, activated their stealth systems and began their work. These elite infiltrators had been waiting in specially designed, ghost ships, vessels that appeared to be nothing more than debris to Zorth sensors. As the alien fleet passed by, the infiltrators attached themselves to enemy vessels like technological parasites. High Admiral Cthax, resplendent in his ceremonial battle carapace aboard his flagship World Ender, received the first warnings too late. Throughout his fleet, critical systems began failing in inexplicable ways. Shield generators overloaded. Weapon systems targeted friendly ships. Communication networks broadcast contradictory orders. Impossible, he raged, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Their technology cannot have advanced this far, this quickly. But it wasn't just technology that humanity had evolved. Their tactics had become something the Zorth strategic computers couldn't predict. When Cthax ordered his fleet to bypass the outer defense lines and strike directly at Earth, he found himself facing what appeared to be an easily exploitable gap in the human formation. Colonel Jace, watching from humanity's dawn, allowed himself a grim smile. Transmit the code phrase. Spring the trap. The gap in Earth's defenses was exactly what the humans wanted the Zorth to see. As Cthax's main battle group pushed forward, the true nature of Operation Hydra revealed itself. Hidden gravitational generators, salvaged from captured Zorth ships and modified by human engineers, activated simultaneously. The very fabric of space-time warped, creating a corridor from which escape would be nearly impossible. All ships, execute attack pattern Prometheus, Jace ordered. From 1,000 hidden positions, human vessels emerged. They were smaller than their Zorth counterparts, more lightly armed, but they carried weapons specifically designed for this moment. The new swarm strike missiles had been just the beginning. Humanity had taken the concept further, creating what they called Legion weapons, smart munitions that could adapt their attack patterns in real time, learning from each hit and miss. The more the Zorth defended against them, the more effective they became. Cthax watched in horror as his carefully planned offensive disintegrated into chaos. The rigid combat doctrine that had served the Zorth for millennia proved worse than useless against humanity's fluid, evolving tactics. Ships that tried to maintain formation were picked apart by wolf pack attacks. Those that attempted to adapt found themselves isolated and destroyed. But victory came at a terrible cost. Even in confusion and disarray, the Zorth fleet possessed overwhelming firepower. Hundreds of human ships were destroyed. Mars took heavy damage from orbital bombardment. The Luna shipyards, humanity's primary construction facility, were severely damaged. The battle reached its crescendo when Cthax, realizing his strategic position was untenable, ordered the deployment of the World Breaker, a weapon the Zorth had never before needed to use against a single species. The massive device began charging, its power signature suggesting it could crack a planet's crust. "Sir!" Martinez called out on the bridge of humanity's dawn. "Energy readings from the enemy flagship are off the charts. If that weapon fires..." Jace didn't hesitate. "Initiate Operation Zeus. Authorization code, Prometheus Unchained." Throughout the battle zone, human ships began broadcasting a signal that Dr. Chen had discovered but hoped they'd never need to use. It targeted a fundamental flaw in Zorth biology, their hierarchical neural structure. The signal didn't kill them, but it disrupted their ability to process complex orders, reducing their combat effectiveness to near zero. The effect was devastating. Across the Zorth fleet, crews found themselves unable to perform even basic functions. The World Breaker, requiring precise coordination to operate, began to overload. Cthax, protected by specialized shielding in his command center, could only watch as his mighty armada fell into disarray. "All ships, push the advantage," Jace ordered. "Drive them back to the slip space point. Don't let them regroup." The battle lasted another 6 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. By the time it ended, the greatest fleet in Zorth history had been reduced to scattered remnants, fleeing back to Empire space. High Admiral Cthax himself was captured when a Phantom team managed to breach his flagship's command deck. In the aftermath, humanity's leaders gathered on the partially rebuilt Luna base to assess their position. The defensive victory had been complete, but the cost had been staggering. Nearly 40% of Earth's fleet had been destroyed. Millions of civilians had died in the fighting. The Luna shipyards would take months to repair. But they had gained something precious: initiative. For the first time since the war began, humanity had the opportunity to take the fight to Zorth space. The captured enemy ships contained data about Imperial defense positions, slip space routes, and force deployments. More importantly, they had proof that the supposedly invincible Zorth could be not just defeated, but routed. Colonel Jace, standing before the Combined Defense Council, laid out his proposal. "We've proven we can defend our territory. Now it's time to show them the true cost of attacking humanity. I propose Operation Nemesis, a direct strike at the heart of their empire." Admiral Chen, his uniform still bearing scorch marks from a near miss during the battle, studied the tactical projections. The losses would be heavy. We'd be operating far from our supply lines, deep in enemy territory. Yes, Jace agreed. But thanks to Dr. Chen's breakthroughs and the Phantom Team's intelligence gathering, we know more about their empire than they ever imagined possible. They thought this attack would break us. Instead, it's given us everything we need to break them. The council deliberated for hours, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would no longer fight merely to survive. They would fight to win, to push back against the empire that had threatened their existence, and to ensure that no alien force would ever again mistake human adaptability for weakness. As the preparations for Operation Nemesis began, Jace found himself in the observation dome of Luna Base, staring at the Earth below. The planet showed the scars of battle, orbital debris fields, the glow of reconstruction efforts, the dark patches where cities had been damaged. But it still turned, still lived, still inspired its children to reach for the stars. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," he told Martinez, who had joined him at the viewport. "We're fighting to show the galaxy that humanity isn't just another species to be harvested or conquered. We're fighting to prove that adaptability, creativity, and determination can overcome even the most overwhelming odds." As if to emphasize his words, a flight of newly commissioned warships passed overhead, their hulls incorporating captured Zorth technology seamlessly integrated with human innovation. They were heading out to begin the first phase of Operation Nemesis, humanity's first major offensive into enemy territory. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and this time, humanity wouldn't be the ones caught off guard. The Zorth Empire was about to learn that their greatest mistake hadn't been attacking Earth, it had been giving humanity time to learn, to adapt, and to prepare their response. Operation Nemesis. The captured Zorth High Admiral Kthax stood in his containment cell aboard humanity's Dawn, watching Colonel Jace with compound eyes that betrayed a mixture of fear and fascination. The neural dampeners prevented him from accessing his species' hierarchical communication network, leaving him truly alone in his thoughts for the first time in his long life. "You cannot comprehend what you're about to face," Kthax clicked, his translator converting the sounds into harsh English. "The outer worlds you may take, but the core systems are impregnable. Generations of Zorth engineering have created defenses that no species has ever breached." Jace smiled coldly. "You still don't understand what makes us different, do you? Every defense can be breached if you're willing to think differently enough. Your empire's greatest weakness is believing in the word impossible." Operation Nemesis began not with a massive fleet engagement, but with silence. Hundreds of Phantom teams, using improved stealth technology reversed engineered from captured Zorth ships, slipped through the Empire's sensor networks. Their targets weren't military installations or fleet bases, but something far more fundamental, the quantum communication relays that kept the vast Empire's hierarchical society functioning. Dr. Sarah Chen, working from the newly established Forward Research Base on Mars, had made a crucial discovery about Zorth civilization. Their entire society depends on constant communication through their quantum network, she explained to the War Council. It's not just for military commands, it's how they maintain their rigid social structure across light years of space. The first phase of Operation Nemesis exploited this dependency. Over 3 weeks, Phantom teams positioned specially designed quantum disruptors throughout the Empire's outer systems. When activated, these devices wouldn't destroy the communication network, they would do something far more devastating. They would introduce subtle errors, causing confusion and doubt in a society that had never needed to question its received instructions. Admiral Chen, coordinating the operation from the recently completed carrier Terran Vengeance, gave the order that would change the face of the war. Activate the disruptors. All fleet elements, commence Phase 2. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the outer systems of the Zorth Empire, their perfectly coordinated society began to show cracks. Ships received conflicting orders. Garrison commanders found themselves unable to verify the authenticity of commands. The rigid hierarchy that had served them for millennia became a source of paralysis. Into this chaos, humanity launched its first major offensive into enemy space. But it wasn't the straightforward assault the Zorth had expected. Instead, human forces struck from multiple vectors simultaneously, using tactics that seemed to defy conventional military logic. Commander Sarah Martinez, now leading her own strike group, demonstrated the new approach at the Battle of Nexus 7, a major Zorth supply hub. Instead of attacking the heavily defended space stations directly, her forces triggered a series of controlled solar flares from the system's star. The Zorth, their tactical doctrine unable to account for such an unprecedented strategy, found their defensive formations disrupted by radiation that human ships had been specifically modified to withstand. The key isn't to match their firepower, Martinez explained to her squadron leaders. It's to change the rules of engagement entirely. Make them fight a type of war they've never imagined. The offensive accelerated as more Zorth systems fell into confusion. Human ships, now incorporating advanced AI tactical systems developed by Dr. Chen's team, could adapt their strategies in real time. They learned from every engagement, sharing tactical data across the fleet through quantum-encrypted channels that the Zorth couldn't intercept. But it wasn't just military success that marked this phase of the war. Humanity's approach to conquest proved radically different from what the Zorth had expected. In systems where local governors surrendered, human forces established cooperative administrations rather than purely military occupation. They offered access to medical technology that could help free lower caste Zorth from their rigid biological programming, giving them choice for the first time in their species' history. This approach caused unprecedented fractures in Zorth society. Lower caste members, seeing the possibility of freedom from their biological imperatives, began actively assisting human forces. The Empire's leadership, unable to comprehend why their subjects would choose uncertainty over their assigned roles, found their control slipping away system by system. Colonel Jace, leading the push toward the Empire's core worlds, encountered the first signs of real resistance at the fortress world of Helix Prime. The Zorth had concentrated their remaining fleet elements there, creating a defensive line that would have been suicide to attack directly. They expect us to either retreat or sacrifice half our fleet in a frontal assault, Jace observed, studying the tactical displays with his command staff. So we're going to do neither. Instead, he unveiled the next phase of human military evolution, the Lazarus Protocol. Using technology that combined Zorth quantum fields with human AI innovation, human ships could now generate multiple sensor ghosts of themselves, each appearing perfectly real to enemy scans. The defending fleet found itself facing what appeared to be an armada many times larger than humanity's actual forces. But the true purpose of the Lazarus Protocol wasn't military deception, it was psychological warfare. Each ghost ship broadcast modified versions of the neural disruption signal, carefully calibrated to target specific castes within the Zorth hierarchy. The Defender's rigid command structure, already strained by the breakdown in quantum communications, began to collapse entirely. They're breaking formation, Martinez reported from her tactical station. Multiple capital ships are going dark, their crews are abandoning their posts. The Battle of Helix Prime marked a turning point in the war. Not only did it shatter the last organized defensive line before the core systems, but it also demonstrated that humanity's approach to warfare had evolved beyond anything the Zorth could counter. Their rigid tactics, unchanged for millennia, proved worse than useless against an enemy that rewrote their strategy for each engagement. In the aftermath of the battle, as human forces secured the Helix Prime system, Colonel Jace received an unexpected communication. It came from the Zorth Central Authority itself, the governing body that had ruled their empire since its founding. They requested a direct meeting to discuss terms. "It's a trap," Martinez argued during the Emergency War Council session. "They're trying to buy time to reinforce the core systems." Dr. Chen, however, saw something different in the data. Their quantum network is showing signs of complete collapse. The hierarchical structure that's held their empire together is failing. They're not trying to buy time, they're trying to survive. The decision fell to Admiral Chen. After careful consideration, he authorized a diplomatic mission, but with conditions that would have been unthinkable at the start of the war. The meeting would take place on a human vessel, using human communications technology. No Zorth quantum links would be permitted. As the diplomatic shuttle carrying the Zorth Central Authority representatives approached humanity's dawn, Jace stood in the observation lounge with Cthax, who had proven invaluable in understanding his species' psychology. "Did you know this would happen?" Jace asked the former High Admiral. "When you first attacked our colonies, did you have any idea what you were starting?" Cthax's mandibles clicked slowly, a gesture that humans had learned indicated deep contemplation. "We thought we were bringing order to chaos, as we had done countless times before. Instead, we awakened something we had forgotten could exist, a species that thrives on chaos, that grows stronger from adversity." The diplomatic shuttle docked, carrying with it the potential end to a war that had transformed both species. But as Jace prepared to meet the Zorth leadership, he knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Humanity had learned to fight in ways that had reshaped the understanding of warfare itself. The question now was, could they learn to make peace just as effectively? The future of two species hung in the balance, and the galaxy watched with bated breath to see what new evolution this unprecedented conflict would produce next. Evolution's price. The diplomatic chamber aboard humanity's dawn hummed with tension as two species that had spent the last 2 years trying to annihilate each other sat down to negotiate peace. The Zorth Central Authority representatives, their ornate carapaces dulled by the stress of recent defeats, faced Colonel Jace and Admiral Chen across a table specially designed to accommodate both species' physical needs. "Before we begin," the lead Zorth representative, Supreme Coordinator Vlak, clicked through his translator, "we must understand something. How did you do it? How did you evolve so quickly? Our studies of your species showed nothing to suggest this capability." Jace exchanged glances with Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been brought in specifically to explain the scientific aspects of humanity's transformation. "That was your first mistake," she said. "You studied our capabilities. You should have studied our potential." The peace talks that followed would reshape the galaxy's political landscape. But they weren't just about establishing borders or negotiating reparations. They were about understanding how two radically different approaches to existence could coexist in the same space. The Zorth, it turned out, had their own revelation to share. "Our empire has stood for 10,000 years, Black explained, because we believed absolute order was the key to survival. Your species has proven that adaptation, even chaos, has its own strength. This understanding has already begun changing our society in ways we cannot stop." The changes were indeed profound. Throughout Zorth space, the rigid hierarchical structure that had defined their civilization was dissolving. Lower castes, inspired by humanity's example and aided by their medical technology, were breaking free from their biological programming. Some embraced the change eagerly, while others fought desperately to maintain the old order. "This is why we called for peace," another representative admitted. "Not just because we were losing the war, but because our entire society is transforming. We need time to manage this evolution, or our empire will tear itself apart." But humanity faced its own challenges. The technologies and tactics they had developed to fight the Zorth had changed them too. The neural interfaces used by phantom teams had begun affecting their operators in unexpected ways. The AI systems that had proven so crucial to their victory were showing signs of emergent consciousness. Even their social structures had evolved, becoming more networked and adaptive, less hierarchical. Dr. Chen's latest research, presented during a crucial session of the peace talks, highlighted the scope of these changes. We've compressed centuries of potential technological and social evolution into 2 years of warfare, she explained. The question isn't whether we can go back to what we were, we can't. The question is, what do we want to become? The peace negotiations expanded beyond simple terms of surrender. They became a framework for managing the evolution of both species. The Zorth would maintain autonomy over their core systems, but with conditions. They would have to allow their citizens free choice in accepting or rejecting the biological programming that had defined their castes. In return, humanity would share their medical technology and help manage the transition. Human colonies would be not just restored but expanded, with some former Zorth systems voluntarily joining the new human federation. But this came with its own responsibilities. Humanity would need to prove they could be not just brilliant warriors, but wise rulers. Colonel Jace, walking through the newly established Joint Security Zone on the former fortress world of Helix Prime, reflected on these changes with Commander Martinez. The once rigid military installation had become a symbol of cooperation, with human and Zorth forces working together to maintain peace. Sometimes I wonder if we won too completely, Martinez mused, watching a group of young Zorth, their carapaces bearing the marks of different castes, freely mingling in a way that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. We didn't just defeat their military, we transformed their entire society. And they transformed us, Jace replied. Look at what we've become. He gestured to his neural interface, now a permanent fixture that allowed him to process information at speeds no unaugmented human could match. We set out to survive, but we've become something our ancestors wouldn't recognize. The transformation wasn't without its costs. Some human colonies, particularly those that had suffered the most during the war, wanted nothing to do with peace or cooperation. They demanded complete Zorth surrender, even extinction. Similarly, conservative elements within Zorth society launched desperate attempts to maintain the old order, leading to civil conflicts that threatened to destabilize entire sectors. Admiral Chen, now serving as humanity's chief representative to the newly formed Galactic Cooperation Council, faced these challenges daily. We're not just negotiating between species anymore, he told the emergency session called to address the rising tensions. We're negotiating between different visions of the future, both human and Zorth. The solution, when it came, emerged from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen and a team of Zorth scientists had been studying the long-term effects of the neural disruption weapons used during the war. They discovered that exposure to these fields, while initially destabilizing, had catalyzed new neural pathways in both species. The Zorth were developing greater individual initiative, while humans were showing enhanced empathy in collective awareness. We're not just evolving separately, Dr. Chen reported to the council. We're evolving together. The very weapons we use to fight each other have created the potential for unprecedented cooperation. This understanding led to the establishment of the Joint Evolution Protocol, a framework for managing and directing the changes both species were undergoing. Rather than fighting the transformation, they would embrace it, guiding it toward beneficial outcomes for both civilizations. The former High Admiral Cthax, now serving as a liaison between human and Zorth military forces, summarized it best during the protocol's signing ceremony. We thought we were fighting for supremacy, but we were actually fighting for evolution. Both our species needed this conflict to break free from their limitations. 5 years after the first Zorth ships appeared in human space, the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The rigid empire that had dominated space for millennia had been replaced by a dynamic coalition of evolving societies. Humanity had grown from a single-system civilization to a major galactic power, their adaptability now legendary among spacefaring species. Colonel Jace, standing on the observation deck of the newly commissioned exploration vessel Tomorrow's Dawn, watched as a mixed crew of humans and Zorth prepared for their first joint mission into unexplored space. The ship represented everything they had achieved, and everything they could become. "We thought we were fighting for survival," he told Dr. Chen, who had joined him for the launch ceremony. "But we were really fighting for the right to change, to grow, to become something more than what we were." "And we're still changing," she replied, her neural interface synchronizing naturally with the ship's systems. "Every discovery, every challenge, every interaction between our species opens new possibilities." As tomorrow's dawn prepared to jump into unexplored space, carrying the combined knowledge and aspirations of two transformed civilizations, the true legacy of the war became clear. It wasn't just about victory or defeat, adaptation or stagnation. It was about the fundamental nature of evolution itself, the power of conflict to forge new paths, break old limitations, and create possibilities that neither side could have imagined alone. The stars beckoned, promising new challenges, new adaptations, and new evolution. Humanity and the Zorth, once mortal enemies, now faced the future together, not as conquered and conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, becoming something more than they ever thought possible.